Hello, my name's the Doctor. You're watching Hadley. Reverse the polarity.
Hello. You gonna film video with me? Yeah?
In the 1970s, Doctor Who was exiled to Earth, and script editor Malcolm Hulke took issue with this, thinking that it would limit the show down to only one of two kinds of stories, that involving alien invasions and mad scientist. But then, Terrance Dicks, Gigachad he is, swoops in with a third concept, creatures that were here all along. So, to the uninitiated of Doctor Who's weirdness, yes, the idea of the Silurians and intelligence in the Earth's past might seem a bit far-fetching, but it's not a concept that's too far out of the realm of possibility. Look anywhere in the world today and you'll struggle to find any structures surviving over 10,000 years old. So, the idea that we'd be able to identify these intelligent races through ancient structures or remnants of technology is the more unrealistic prospect of that situation. And this is a concept that has been explored in sci-fi before. It's even part of expanded Doctor Who canon that the Silurians and the Deep Ones portrayed in Lovecraft's mythos are one and the same. Take a shot every time I mention Lovecraft in a video, as well as being the same species as the creature from the Black Lagoon. The Silurians were the original masters of Earth before humans. However, at the height of their civilization, this era was cut short. Their scientists calculated that they were imminent for a geological disaster that would destroy all life on the planet, so their government constructed suspended animation shelters all around the world where theirs and other prehistoric races could rest until the danger passed. Though they survived the disaster, unfortunately, something else happened in that dormant period. Namely, humanity. It's now the 21st century, the Silurians are waking up, and they are surprised to find someone else has moved into their house in their absence. And justifiably as well. This was their land, they were here before us, and you could make the argument that they actually have better claim to it than we do. But humans also didn't do anything wrong. How can we be in the wrong when all we did was exist? But then, how can we expect the Silurians to move planets when this is their home arguably more than it is ours? Eventually, the Silurians are going to wake up, and that is going to be a question the show will have to answer. The biggest moral conundrum the show has, and probably will ever face. What do we do about the Silurians? Now, with this problem, the most obvious kind of parable that comes to mind is about the English colonies settling in America and their of their natives, and at first glance it might seem that that is the story the show is trying to tell. Some sugar-coated civil war and immigration allegory that won't accept the kids, or members of the fandom menace. Now, though colonization is bad, nothing but the wokest takes on this channel, there's a few factors that don't really make this idea mesh up. Though the writers do definitely want to bring this sort of imagery to mind, we didn't know that the Silurians existed. We didn't steal their land, we didn't genocide them. This was where our species naturally grew up, and so we have just as much claim over the planet as they do. But also, more than that, the Silurians are not innocent victims either. Let's stop looking at the idea of them and more into how they're actually portrayed in the series. They first appear, quite appropriately, in Doctor Who and the Silurians in 1970, where a group of them are awakened from hibernation by energy from a nearby nuclear power plant. Initially, the Third Doctor and the colony's leader manage to negotiate a compromise that honours both parties. Unfortunately, that fragile peace is shattered when a more hostile Silurian murders their leader and takes their place. And to that end, the Silurians then attempt to develop and release a virus that would wipe out humanity, leaving the planet empty for their recolonization. And despite the Doctor's best efforts to broker a peaceful solution, the Silurians are still determined to exterminate humanity, leaving them to be destroyed by Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart to preemptively deal with this threat. Where have you gone? The next technical appearance was 2 years later in The Sea Devils, where an amphibious cousin species of them are awakened by the Master, who wants to use them to attack humanity. The Doctor again offers to broker peaceful negotiations between the creatures and the humans, recalling how he failed in his early attempt with the Silurians, but despite his best efforts, again, things turn sour and the Sea Devils decide to go to war, while the British government is intent on repeating Unix's actions against the Silurians the first time. And later, the land-based Silurians returned along with their aquatic cousins in the 5th Doctor story, Warriors of the Deep, which is set in the year 2084, This serial is about two factions of humanity at a stalemate in a Cold War, and the Silurians and Sea Devils attempting to shatter that peace, hoping that combining forces, they could convince humanity to wipe themselves out. They then weren't seen again until a very long time later after the show's revival in a two-part 11th Doctor story, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, in which they're again woken up by an underground industrial work, and it's frankly just a rehash of Doctor Who and the Silurians, actually, but just not as good. And I hate the redesigns that these guys went through this period. They took a genuinely unique monster and whittled it down to just another animal-human hybrid, especially when you look at the original designs for their return. And then the Sea Devils finally made their return to the show recently in 2022's special, Legend of the Sea Devils, where they went up against the 13th Doctor, 10 Doctors after their original opponent. Their redesign fared a lot better. See, you think of the Silurians as one of the big Doctor Who enemies, and they're really not. If you don't count them and the Sea Devils as one species, then that's 60 years and only 3 stories that they've had. That's only one more than the Yeti. Actually, no, the Yeti's got downtime. The Yeti have the same number of episodes as the Silurians. And that's because most of the Silurian appearances post-Hungry Earth have either been via ensemble pieces or cameos. That's actually a bit of a problem that New Who has. Introduce a big monster from the classic series that was remembered and fondly loved, then relegate them to casual/joke appearances. It took us 13 years to get another Sontaran-centric episode, just saying. And that's because the plot of these Silurian episodes are essentially the same every time. We as humans have moved into their land and now they want it back. And every time the solution to this conflict is to just extend their hibernation period because, well, there's just no practical way to answer that. In their first appearance, the ethical dilemma starts as an even-sided argument, but then that's quickly thrown away by the writers by having the peaceful Silurian assassinated by its warmongering brethren.
But I think I could convince them on the condition that you release those trapped men first.
Those apes have only shown hostility to us.
And you to them.
And then the exact same thing happens in every story to feature the lizard folk since.
There can be no alternative to peaceful coexistence.
There is, Doctor. A final solution.
It almost feels like the writers recognise the interesting moral ground that they're standing on, linger there just enough to make you think about things, provoke just enough colonisation imagery to make you think the story is saying something, but then immediately swap the narrative out for a standard Monster of the Week formula.
You were building something here, come on, an alliance could work.
It's too late for that, Doctor.
And they have to do this because the only other alternative is just a question that's impossible to answer. Because as much as I love the comparisons between the Silurians and the Native Americans, unfortunately that's just never the story that they've been used to tell. The Silurians are a warish species, they practice eugenics, they're xenophobic towards humans, they are never portrayed as the innocent indigenous people who've been invaded by colonists. As interesting as their concept is, by the end of it, the Silurians end up just being yet another alien race that wants to wipe out humanity, which is a shame because they could be so much more than that. The far more interesting concept is to follow through with that original idea. Let's repurpose the role the Silurians have in the story to follow the problem through to a genuine conclusion without taking the easy way out. What happens when they wake up? Because they are going to one day, that date is still coming. And yes, it's a deep, ethically challenging story, but come on, Doctor Who has always been a political show. It was made in the 1960s by a gay Indian man and the first female producer in television. It has always been stories about racism and politics, just with a splash of sci-fi paint over it to make it more digestible. Realistically, for them to tell a story on a worldwide scale of millions, maybe billions of lizard people waking up and having to be reintroduced permanently into the planet's ecosystem, that would be a scope impossible to tell in an episode of Doctor Who. And even if you could devote an entire mini-series to it, something like Flux, what happens in it? Telling a story like this is something that the show could never forget. Every showrunner in the future would have to incorporate this into their stories because suddenly, Silurians would be just as common as any minority in the West. Every story on Earth would have to include them, regardless of if it was relevant to the plot or not, because they just exist now. But here's the thing, I would absolutely bloody love that. Like, I doubt that there is a person watching this that wouldn't think that is the coolest concept to see in the show. I would love it if the Silurians were just a daily part of life on Earth and could be relegated to such a slice of life role. Of course I want to see Kobayashi Silurian made. I would love seeing some story in the future with an Earth outpost supporting humans, Silurians and Sea Devils. They're all Earthlings after all, united we stand and whatnot. They're not going to do this story because of budgetary restraints, and more so because of the creative restraints. I understand why, but all of the material surrounding the Silurians just begs for this to be a story to be told.
What is it, boy? What have you spotted?
And who knows, maybe there are ways to do this story justice. There are locations on Earth like the Sahara, which are uninhabitable by people, or maybe even an artificial continent could be built for them. Everything that I've been saying so far has been a tall order, but that's a more practical way of addressing it in a way that's at least a bit more realistic. Are you honestly telling me that a recurring location, maybe just visited once every season, couldn't be a Silurian island? Like Genosha in the X-Men? Just before all that rather unfortunate genocide business. So, unfortunately, while the roles that the Silurians are used in the stories are a bit of wasted potential, that's kind of what they need to be. The moral of every one of those stories is that the current state of our species would be unable to coexist with them. And they're in the same boat. The Silurians, as with most of Doctor Who monsters, are a critique of humanity in its current state. Jesus Christ! It's like Star Trek. The whole premise of that show is humanity is at its best. This is where we've abolished all disease, racism, and money. We are hoping that when we achieve that perfect version of humanity, then we'll be able to accurately deal with the situation. But hang on, I'm sorry, I thought the whole point of the Cybermen was that they were humanity's natural evolution. That's why there's so many different Cybermen origin stories, because wherever there's people, there end up being Cybermen. So, are we just waiting for the Cybermen to deal with the Silurians? Because I can tell you fairly well how that's gonna go. And while I'm at it, they shouldn't even be called the Silurians anyway. They are from the Cretaceous era. The Silurians were from millions of years before the dinosaurs evolved. Hello? Hi, this is Dr. Hadley from the future. I recorded this video in 2022 and just never did anything with it. But I'm bringing it back now because we are getting a whole ass spin-off dedicated to just the Silurians and the politics surrounding them. This is exactly what I was saying I wanted. But now I'm gonna look like I've remodeled my room, dyed my hair, all just so I can be smart and pretend that I predicted something. I did, I promise. And this keeps happening. I do a video talking about how the world of Harry Potter is so much better than its base books, and we're really missing an opportunity not having an open world game. And what happens?
The choices you make now will define the legacy of Hogwarts.
Or I do an iceberg video talking about a TV show license that's been inactive for 15 years and what a shame it is because there's so much potential. What happens? Even my RE9 predictions seem to be lining up. So in wake of this, I'm delighted to make the following announcements: that they are beginning to animate Paul McGann's audios from Big Finish for the DVD range, Dino Crisis is getting a remake in the RE engine, and J.K. Rowling has been assassinated by a TikTok influencer. Back to your regularly scheduled programming.
The polarity.
Would someone writing for the Silurians just look up a goddamn Wikipedia article? They are called the Cretaceouses. Oh, okay, actually I can see why they're called that now. And that brings an end to our think piece. The Cretaceouses are some of my favourite Doctor Who villains, so it really does me dirty seeing them so underutilised in every story they're featured in. And so I applaud you for letting me sit down and whinge about that for 10 minutes. Let me know, are you happy with the role that the Earth Reptiles currently have in the show? What do you want to see from them in the future? And are there any other... You like the Silurians, don't you? What do you want to see from them in the future? And there are... You are a little menace, young man. And are there any other topics that the show kind of touches on but you feel doesn't go deep enough into? Leave them in the comments down below. I hope you've enjoyed this strange delve into niche media. If you have, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you haven't, I hope you have found it just the least bit interesting. If you're interested in seeing more of us, I'm most active on Instagram and Twitter, or if you want to see me making a fool out of myself for the validation of strangers, my TikTok is also a thing.
Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye!